Well, hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to I Speak to the Silence. You are here with Melissa Tools, also known as Melissa K. Hart. And on this podcast, we talk about all things wellness, faith, and wholeness, and how crucial it is in understanding the combination of all three and how we can help our brothers and sisters in Christ who are living with various challenges, experiencing various situations, and especially on this day. It is the week of Father's Day celebration, and we continue to salute the fathers out there that are doing what they are supposed to be doing, especially as it is related to the word, where you are taking care of your household and taking care of your children and doing the best that you can to provide and to work and to ensure that everyone is clothed and fed and all of the things. But today we're going to dive into a little different um, direction as we focus on not keeping things in, not just going through the motions, and especially for men who have emotionally suppressed a lot of what they're feeling and how to even process how they're feeling. So, this episode is entitled Don't Just Keep Going. I was listening to a podcast and earlier in the week, and one of the things that was shared from a well known pastor is that for all of us, people of faith, we tend to hold things in and we just go and go and go and go until unfortunately something breaks. There's also a show called Snap. And believe it or not, people of faith can snap. Okay? Been there, done that. That's a whole nother topic. We'll do Real Talk Part 2 a little later on this year. But ultimately, we continue to hold things in and suppress things in. And that in itself brings so much stress. It brings on challenges onto the physical body as well as the spiritual side of us. And many times we don't know what to do with it or how to even work through some of what we're dealing with because it's just so much. It almost feels like, a wave just hits one after the other after the other. And so today we're going to dive into, the things that goes unspoken, especially for men. It is June 16th at the time of this recording, and it is also Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. So this episode and our next episode, this will be part one, and then we'll dive into some more in part two. But this is a subject that affects so many people, and yet we rarely discuss it openly. That is my goal with this podcast, is to speak to those areas and to speak to the silence and the stigmas that not only are around men not getting the support that they need, but all of us, if we are ever in need of support when it comes to our mental health, and as I like to say, our mental wellness. So I hope the information on this episode helps you in some way, shape, or form. And if you know someone that is in need of what you hear or is in need of some encouragement, some strategies, or just not really sure what to do next, please share this with them, because our mission and vision is to bring hope to the brokenhearted, as we are commissioned in Isaiah 61. So, this particular topic, as we navigate through this conversation, I really want us to draw on a few areas in the Bible that we can find some encouragement and even guidance. And again, this will be part one. We'll dive into more in part two. But first of all, let's look at what is emotional suppression. And especially for men, I'm going to go out on that limb and say majority of men have been conditioned to keep their emotions in from a young age. I don't know too many boys that are encouraged to cry. Do you? I don't know too many boys that are encouraged to sit and talk about why they cry or what they're feeling or what's going on. Maybe when they're a toddler, because we're still trying to understand them and just wanting to know what's going on with them. But by the time they get to about 6 or so, maybe 5 or 6, it's almost expected that they should know to turn off that emotional knob in their brain and just not cry ever. They hear things like, boys don't cry, man up, don't be a girl, don't be a insert the blank. Because at that point, they're being told what a quote unquote man is or should be and how they should act, how they should respond, how they should handle themselves, how they should handle situations and circumstances. But what that does is teaching them to keep their feelings to themselves, to hide the emotions, and they're not even able to express the emotions because they're never taught what they're feeling. They start crying and say, what are you crying for? Stop that crying. You don't need to be crying. What you talking about? Why are you talking to me? I told you just do it, just do it. Now let me stick a pin right there. Yes, as parents, we tell our children to do something or we give them an instruction, we give them a directive, we're expecting them to follow directions, right? So I'm not talking about that. But let's picture, for example, say a boy around age 10. He's coming into the house and he's wiping his eyes. And initially there is just resistance or, he's ignored as to what's bothering him. He might get a question of what's wrong with you with a real sarcastic, flair. And because he's already been conditioned since age 5 not to cry, he's trying to bring the tears back in and he's doing the nothing, I'm good, I'm fine. Which then comes off as if he has an attitude. And now the adult that's handling or working with him, potentially a father maybe, like, well, wipe your eyes. I don't understand what you're saying. Stop that crying. Now he's getting reprimanded. And he's trying to just get himself together because he's either embarrassed or feels like I don't even know what's going on. So how is he supposed to respond? Then he gets in trouble because it seems like he's being rude or disrespectful, and he's really not. He's just trying to get himself together because you told him not to cry. Then when he's finally able to talk, he may tell you something that's maybe happened outside with a friend. And then what is he told? Oh, brush it off. Oh, you'll be all right. Don't worry about that. And his feelings are never validated, nor is he even given the opportunity to express them or process them. And so, 9 times out of 10, that boy and his emotions, his way of expressing them looks like anger, looks like frustration, because he doesn't even know what words to use in order to express what's going on. Isn't that something? I mean, really think about that. So this is the detriment that we have done to our young men, our boys, and eventually as they grow into men, because they have no true way of expressing themselves, nor do they know how to then deal with all of the emotions and feelings other than just keeping them in. This affects their mental health, this affects their relationships, and overall well-being. They're having challenges on the job. They don't really know, who to talk to and express how they're feeling or what's going on because, again, men don't talk about these things. Why should they? You just deal with it and you keep it moving. But that's the problem. We just keep moving. And things get compounded and compacted, and it's pushed down further and further and further until something happens. So when we talk about the impact of emotional suppression, let's talk about on the mental health side of things. According to Mental Health of America, over 6 million, again, 6 million men are suffering from mental health diagnoses or have dealt with a mental health crisis. And I'm sure that number is extremely low because, again, that means someone's reporting it or putting it down on paper or letting their doctor know this is actually happening or however it's being expressed. But yet 6 million men have been reported of having a mental health challenge and or crisis this year. So suppressing those emotions, it can lead to anxiety, it can lead to depression, stress, being overwhelmed, which ultimately can also lead to things shutting down. And it's literally like a pressure cooker just waiting. Because eventually the steam has to go somewhere. The stress has to go somewhere. The challenges have to go somewhere. And where do we find it? Often in the body, often in the way how we relate to people. There's a lot of things that's happening with, people and their health, their medical health. I would go out on a limb and say a lot of it is because of unprocessed and unhealthy ways of dealing with our mental health. That's just my opinion, but that is a nail I'm willing to die on because it's the truth. But suppressing those emotions also lead to challenges with relationships. When those emotions are suppressed, how do you communicate effectively? How can you? Again, think of the little boy trying to get his words together, trying to tell what's going on, and yet he's just dismissed or not regarded, or he doesn't have the words to say how he's feeling. He doesn't have the words to express them because he wasn't taught. So the communication in a relationship suffers. Or that may be friendship, that may be business partners, that may be romantic relationships, maybe family members. Ultimately, relationships become a challenge and can be strained in many areas. And as I mentioned again, the physical health, there's, various studies that show that emotional suppression can lead to physical issues, heart issues, your immune system being weak. Think about when you're extremely stressed. Sometimes you get sick, you're tired, the body starts to shut down, you don't have as much energy. All of those things play a part because of suppressing your emotions. So if we think about, well, Melissa, that sounds devastating. And how do you even get through it? Or how do you overcome it? There's some people in the Bible that I think about that, were okay and show us how to express ourselves or how they express themselves. And it shows how, that was honored or received by God, and they then got the help that they need in a divine way. You think about David, right? King David. And if you read about David, which today we'll talk about more so the the individuals that, opened up and shared their frustrations or were able to share their emotions or express their emotions. And part two, we'll talk about the ones who had some challenges, and because of those challenges, it seemed like they should have been discounted, but God still used them and still loved them. But if we look at David, he's known as a man after God's own heart. And David did not care about anybody else when it came to expressing himself. If he was happy, he danced himself happy. If he was angry, he told God about it. If he felt sorry for what he did, and if you read his story, there are several things that he did that eventually was forgiven. He still had consequences for them, but was still forgiven. But David did not keep anything in. When he was confident, he showed it, and he was bold about it. When he was scared or frightened, he went to God about it. When he was in his sin and, did what he did when it came to Bathsheba and all the other things, eventually he repented. He was sorrowful when his son passed away, and, two actually that died. I mean, David just shared what he felt when he felt it. And he continued to be used by God. Now, I'm not saying if you don't share your feelings, you won't be used. Please don't twist my words. But I'm just giving you an example here. And even in Psalms 34, it tells us that God is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalms 34, verse 18. And so if you open up about those areas that are tender, and you open up about those areas that are difficult, one, to God, and two, help to ask him to direct you who to go to. Because the other thing is, not everybody's going to understand what you need, and not everybody's going to understand how to help you, especially if they're still in the same mindset of men don't cry, men don't share emotions. It's almost like you shouldn't have them. You should be robotic. And then when you are robotic, people complain. So it's like, what do? You can't win, right? If you share your emotions and your feelings, or you cry, you're considered, I won't say the word that comes to mind, but y'all know what I'm talking about in the secular world. But if you don't share your emotions or you don't communicate, then it's almost like you come off as rigid or hard or maybe rude or distant. Insert whatever you need there. Because again, the conditioning from childhood and the story that you've been given from childhood is that you don't express your feelings. You don't express your emotions. It's almost like you shouldn't have them. But we were designed by the Creator, by God, with them. Women probably feel them a little bit more, but we are also told to express them. We're given the space. We're given the room to talk. We're given the room to have conversations and powwows and tell me what's wrong, baby girl. Come here, and get the hugs and the cuddles and all of that, right? Our boys need that too, because they will suffer in silence if we don't open that platform, open that room in order for them to speak and share and talk. Sometimes that's what they need, is just to talk. Believe it or not, teenagers do talk. They do. They talk a lot. But as adults, we have to be willing to listen, and listen non-judgmentally. That's one of the trainings that I do. We talk about how to hear youth and young adults when they speak and how to listen non-judgmentally, because often they talk to us or they may say something to us, but we as adults already have the resolve in our heads because we're going off of our experience and we're trying to already solve the problem and then just keep it moving and yay, we've saved the day. But that is not often what they need. Sometimes they do like to hear that someone else has gone through it and made it through and they're intrigued by the stories that are told. But sometimes in that moment, they just need someone to listen and to hear them. And that's it. Another one that comes to mind is Paul. And the Apostle Paul, he talked openly about his struggles and his emotional pains. He talked about, finding help in God and his strength. And in even in his story, he talks about, his weaknesses and acknowledging that he is someone who is wounded and needs help. In Second Corinthians 12, and you can read it at your leisure, 9 and 10, he talks about God's grace. And you see that God's grace is sufficient for you. God's grace is sufficient for you. It says, because my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That's why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, and difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. When you're weak, God is strong. He is strong. He's strong in you. Lean on Him, trust in Him, and also ask Him to lead you and direct you to the one that you need to be, connected with, to the one to help you. It may be a medical professional. It may be a group. It may be a therapist. It may be a coach. It may be someone in your family that, you can trust to speak with and just bounce those ideas off of, just to see, hey, where next can I go? Should I go? It may be that if you're in a crisis, you do need to make that call. 988 is the crisis hotline in the US. And you can connect with someone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, via phone, via text, or you can get on the website and talk via chat. But seek God for the direction. He's always there. He's always listening. Nothing is too big or too small for Him to handle. He wants you to cast your cares on Him, and He will take that burden. He can handle it. The challenge is not picking it back up, which is what we often do. But whatever it is, seek Him. The other part is to follow His instructions, His lead, His directions. And when you do make those connections, to connect with a community that is not shunning you or putting you down or telling you that you're not doing enough. Now, if you're really not doing enough and all you're doing is complaining, then that's a different story too. When you're really actively working and trying, and we'll talk again in part 2 a little bit more about what it may look like when someone's going through, depression, when someone's going through grief or loss. Sometimes it's acute, which means it's just for a brief moment, but sometimes it can be chronic, which is long term and intense. And sometimes it can be severe. And when someone's going through severe situations, you don't even want to get up out of the bed. And it's not that you don't even want to, you physically feel like you have weights weighing you down and you can't even move. Eating is not even something that you desire because of the weight. When it comes to anxiety, the paralyzing place someone can be because of anxiety, which is a form of fear. And yes, the Bible says that He has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. When someone is in that state, however, it's hard to get out of it. It is a fight, and a fight sometimes that they cannot do on their own. So as you continue to pray and take some time to reflect on various things that you may be experiencing, or someone that that is going through a challenge. Sometimes life hits us with curveballs. We all got hit with a curveball a few years ago. Many people are still trying to recover. I know I am. But when you go from one extreme to another, you do need that time to process. If you were suddenly laid off because the company shut down, or you found out that all your funds in your 401k is gone because of whatever other mismanagements was going on and completely out of your control, that's a curveball. That's a hit to the gut and your wallet and your lifestyle, your family, your livelihood. If you got hit with a diagnosis that you weren't expecting, an illness or a report that just seemed like it came out of nowhere, do you just ignore it? No, we can't. We shouldn't, but we do. And sometimes when we ignore it, it's like, okay, eventually I'll figure it out. I'll deal with it later. Or it sometimes is too much to try to process. But at some point, it has to be confronted. It has to be worked out, worked through, worked on. Because if not, it can bring such a heavier weight that can bring further destruction. So as you pray and you reflect, I encourage you to take some time. Most men don't journal, but I'm going to encourage you for you to journal, take notes, drop your thoughts down. I had a client that, I said journaling, and he was like, "What? We do what?" I'm like, okay, instead of journaling, how about just writing down your thoughts? Just putting a pause in the day, in the evening, or the morning, and just jotting down your thoughts. Okay? And even in those moments of jotting down your thoughts, I would encourage you to add a scripture that you can stand on, depending on the circumstance that you may be handling or dealing with. But know that it's important to recognize that the feeling and expressing your emotions, again, is just natural. It's being human. God created us with feelings and emotions for a reason. So men, just like women, need to process those feelings openly and in a healthy manner. Because what we tend to see, and when we see, the rage and the anger, or, the opposite side of being healthy, is because these emotions have never been processed. They've never been given room to process, or they've never been validated. There's so many men that have been abused physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, sexually, and yet they're just keeping that inside, and it is eating away at them. Because how can they be vulnerable to talk about something that was done to them if no one is willing to listen with a compassionate heart? How can they be vulnerable and open if no one will take the time to allow them to be vulnerable and open? And then how can they trust someone or anyone if they've never had the opportunity to practice that? So I challenge you, men, to take this opportunity to research, seek out support. If you are looking for a coach rather than a therapist because you're really not wanting to dive deep into those things, then hey, send me a message, send me a note. You can email me at mkhart@toolsts.com. Again, that's the letter M, the letter K, the word heart, at tools, TOOLESTS.com. And we'll have a chat. And I hope I'll be able to help you to get to that next level and or connect you with resources that are going to help you to move forward into your destiny, into your purpose, into the man, or continue to be the man and grow into the man that God has called you to be. Nobody's perfect, and we don't expect perfection. But before that day does come when you go on to glory, the goal is for you to die empty, fulfilling everything that God has placed inside of you. If you know someone that's in need of support, you know someone that is really hurting, again, I encourage you to connect with them, check on them, call them. Don't text them. Anybody can text and send a message and it seems like they are all right. Call them. You need to hear them. If you're close enough, go visit them. You need to see them. You can only hide but so much when you're in front of somebody. But check on your strong friends. Check on those that seem like everything's all right, because 9 times out of 10, it's not. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. And we are all good at wearing a mask. That'll be another conversation for another day. But if you'd like to continue following, I thank you for listening. You can follow me on Instagram at mkhart_TTS. You can also follow me here on YouTube at mkhart. Again, if you would like to send me an email, please feel free to do so at mkhart, or again, mkhart at toolsts.com. You can also find me on Facebook, which is Facebook TTS The Journey. I'm also on Twitter and some other threads, but ultimately my goal is to help as many as I can and to do the work according to Isaiah 61. Remember that you are not alone, and you were and are created with purpose and destiny. You are called to live, to ignite, not to entertain. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And I do pray that this day finds you well. Until next time, stay blessed.